Hey, what's up guys, Ruff here. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about the current state of Crimson Desert a few days after its official release. Now this game got off to a hot start, but it found some trouble thanks to very negative reviews provided by games journalists and a bunch of scrutiny provided by the usual suspects on social media. However, as the days have passed on since its official release, this game has actually attracted more and more concurrent player counts and more positive reviews because people are finding out the truth. This open world action adventure game that features no woke nonsense is actually very appealing to people once they give it a chance. However, on release, games journalists and activists on social media came out with a slew of incoherent complaints about this game, including complaints about a lack of diversity in the game. But here's the shocking part. It actually worked for a bit. At one point, this game was at a 50-50 reviewer rating on Steam. However, as the days have gone on and more people actually tried out this game instead of listening to journalists and activists, it's raised from about 50-50 to nearly 80%, a mostly positive set of reviews for this game, much to the dismay of woke journalists who are crashing out on social media now that this game has turned things around, including people like this saying the loser gamer chuds are celebrating this as an anti-woke victory, and it's making them very upset. So what's going on with Crimson Desert? Well, this was a much hyped up release. Again, this is an open world action adventure game, and of course it had a great level of success. Nearly 15 minutes out of the gate, it broke 100,000 concurrent players, which that's sort of a number for a game like this. That is a great start. However, almost immediately, this game was bombarded with negative reviews from reviewers such as IGN, who gave this a 6 out of 10 rating, basically saying it's very underwhelming and boring. Now that's very rich coming from IGN, who once gave Dustborn and Concord 7s individually, and even gave Dragon Age the Veilguard a 9. So any sort of rating coming from IGN, especially a 6, means absolutely nothing, but it did seem to have an impact on whether or not some people are willing to give this game a shot in the first place. Let's move on to some other reviews. This one coming from Jason Schreier, who has retired from Twitter, for facing valid criticism over the years, and eventually moved on to the echo chamber known as Blue Sky. He left a review for Crimson Desert, calling it boring and soulless, and that he didn't want to play this at all anymore, and said this game feels like it was designed for people who just want to consume content. Now, of course, nobody likes a consumer who will simply buy whatever slop comes their way because that's just what they feel like doing, and they just want to buy something no matter what the quality or what the messaging is for a particular product. But yeah, at the end of the day, people are consuming content. These are video games. It is content that you are consuming. So just calling it something that people wanted to consume as a form of content is not really a valid criticism unless you provide some sort of rationale as to why that is a bad thing in this case. But then again, just like with IGN, you think about who is sharing this message, and journalists like Jason Schreier are completely immune to predicting the success of a game. This is the same guy who looked at the initial launch of Dragon Age the Veilguard and saw 58,000 concurrent players on the first day of release and said, go woke, go top the charts. And of course, we know that Dragon Age the Veilguard completely ripped BioWare apart and was a massive failure. And think about that 58K number, right? Like, Crimson Desert nearly doubled that in the first 15 minutes of its release. But when confronted with people asking whether or not they genuinely enjoy turds like Dragon Age the Veilguard, Jason Schreier, in his professional capacity as a games journalist, said, I actually don't like the game very much, but I like seeing you chuds get dunked on. Yes, this is a 50-something-year-old man unironically calling detractors on the internet chuds. But we keep moving forward. There's some reviews on Metacritic complaining that Crimson Desert does not have enough LGBTQ+ representation, One review that provided a 0 out of 10 said this game is disappointing because it had no LGBTQ representation at all. It's disappointing in 2026. This isn't about politics. It's about feeling invited to play and included in the world the game is trying to build. Amazing stuff. Stunning and brave. Now, you think all of these reviews and complaints are ridiculous, but it was working. Like I said, it prevented some people from even trying this game, and it even had an impact on the studio who designed it, Pearl Abyss. Pearl Abyss and their share price plummeted nearly 30% after the first reviews arrived for this game. This is a very big deal, okay? A 30% drop based largely on the negative reviews. And like I said, on Steam there for a moment, it was sitting at a 50-50. A lot of people were reading into what the journalists were saying and having a very negative outlook on this game or giving it a very small chance. To add on top of that, there were complaints about AI usage in this game. A Redditor discovered an AI-generated artwork in Crimson Desert. And you know how certain pockets of people on social media are when it comes to AI. They get very upset. Now here comes the irony once again. Consider the source. One of the journalists reporting on this is IGN, who complained about the AI-generated art assets contained in Crimson Desert, while of course using Sprout Social, which is an AI tool. They literally made this article using AI tools in order to complain about AI-generated art assets. The irony is palpable. However, some people made a big fuss about this on social media, saying that they're refunding this game immediately, despite the fact that Crimson Desert came out and addressed this immediately and removed any sort of AI-generated art in the game. But then again, who's the source? Look at the person making this complaint. A game dev for Intergalactic. Yes, this Intergalactic that has a brutal like-to-dislike ratio for its official trailer on YouTube, and that is the person who is whining about this. Very interesting behavior coming from a game dev who is immediately pitting themselves against Crimson Desert. Meanwhile, they should be worrying about what's going on in their own backyard as opposed to what's going on at other studios. But of course, self-awareness is not really in the making of these sorts of game devs or anyone who'd be working on Intergalactic for that matter. But it's not just game devs and journalists complaining about it, social media users as well. We see this sort of sentiment from some users saying, is this game actually going to be good, or is this going to be another Wukong situation? Another Wukong situation. The rewriting of history when it comes to Black Myth Wukong is very strange. I mean, look at this game, right? This is a single-player game that released nearly 2 years ago, and it's still sitting at 4,200 in-game players with a 96% positive rating. Okay, this was a triumph. Peaked at over 2 million concurrent players. This was a massive success, but now it's being considered a game that's overhyped. Like, this is crazy. And you can see right here, on the same vein of these reviews being very misleading, Crimson Desert has around just shy of an 80 Metascore from the critics, but compare that to Black Myth Wukong, that had an 81. And also Stellar Blade, that also had an 81. So, like, even the meta scores here are very, very hard to rely on, especially given their history with games like Black Myth Wukong. But of course, I think there was a big issue with the influence of journalists and people having a very short fuse and tolerance for this game. In fact, there was a large number of players quitting Crimson Desert and even getting refunds because the first puzzle in the game was too hard. Yes, people were giving up that fast, and I think a lot of it is because of a super negative perception they were getting from journalists, game devs, and social media users who said this game is garbage. And when they saw the first obstacle in their way, they immediately quit because they already wanted to quit on it in many sorts of ways. We also had people like this trying to take an early victory lap the day or so after its release, tagging content creators like Smash JT, Very Dark, and Top G8 here saying, can you explain this discrepancy, referring to the reviews on SteamDB for Marathon versus Crimson Desert, saying, I thought Crimson Desert was going to be the game to own the libs or something, and somehow it's getting worse reviews than Marathon. Well, that was a big mistake. Never spike the ball in the end zone too early here because, well, things would turn around quickly. As you can see, it went from a 50-50 rating to well over 70 in just the last 24 hours or so, completely turning things around. In fact, it got close to 80% at one point. And look at the peak player count for the day. It's around 205,000 in-game players as of recording this video. And overall, it looks amazingly healthy. The peak concurrent count is actually increased the last couple of days, reaching the all-time peak several days after its release. It's actually improving over time because people are coming out and giving this game a chance in spite of everything games journalists and activists on social media are trying to say about this game. And part of the reason things are going better is because the developers have been on top of things. They have come out with a lot of changes, and of course the developers are Pearl Abyss, and they've been very quick coming out and addressing all of the complaints and making a lot of moves, and people are responding very well. It is no secret that right after this set of new changes through this patch, they reached their all-time concurrent player count. That is a very good sign. Now also realize that user pointed out Marathon. Yeah, Marathon has an 85% review rating, but right now it's sitting at 34,000. I mean, only a tiny fraction of what Crimson Desert has right now. And just look at the all-time here. It has been dwindling consistently every single day, despite having some changes come out. It hasn't really impacted much. Like, Marathon, like I said, was never going to be a gigantic flop. It wasn't going to be a Concord, but like these numbers seem pretty disappointing for a game that had a budget in the hundreds of millions. But I guess that is a comparison point now people are using. You can see some journalists like Paul Tassi, I mean, another positive impact by Paul Tassi here, saying, me, when I see Crimson Desert increase from 58% to 78% positive Steam reviews in 72 hours. He is on the right side of history as a journalist for another release in a row. Good on him, but not every person in the games journalism scene was happy about things turning around for Crimson Desert. You see Andy Cortez here absolutely losing his mind, saying, truly had no idea the loser gamer chuds were claiming Crimson Desert's success as an anti-woke victory, LMAO. They just make up the weirdest nonsensical stuff. So yeah, this guy's jimmies are totally not rustled here. He's talking about loser gamer chuds, aka anyone who disagrees with him on anything. And he is saying that people are claiming this as an anti-woke victory. I don't really know about that. I don't really see many people doing that. I just think people are saying the game is getting more positive coverage and positive reviews the second people stopped listening to games journalists and actually tried out the game for themselves. I think there is definitely a lesson here. And just look at this guy. Like, what is this guy even doing? I mean, this guy's so audience captured by his own agenda. He has to include this in his handle, saying that he didn't pay for the blue check mark. He has to make sure to all the people that follow him that he is not supporting Elon Musk with this blue check mark. He didn't pay for it. He has to make this clear because otherwise he's going to get eaten alive by the progressives he is trying to appeal to so desperately. You know, the totally normal person over here who recently directly tagged Asmongold and said that when his father passed away, it made things worse for him because the guy had no one left to disappoint, and then called him a ugly, racist cretin. Yes, totally progressive and empathetic as usual with these individuals. But there were some more responses from Mighty Keith here, one of the shills in the industry, saying, I was shocked to not see the usual grifters posting 50 times a day about Crimson Desert's negative receptions at launch until I found out they, for whatever reason, tried to adopt it into their culture war. Their hypocrisy has no end. Had this been a game they thought clashed with their ideals in any way, you would see headlines like Crimson Desert a failure, everyone hates Crimson Desert, and other hyperbolic rhetoric. I think the lady doth protest too much. I think Mighty Keef here is projecting, because if this game was presented, as they're trying to claim, as some anti-woke triumph, these people would be dancing in the streets if it was failing, okay? But because this game turned things around, in spite of what journalists were trying to do to it for days, all of a sudden now they're seething and coping about it, trying to say that people would have not talked about its failure because it's some sort of agenda push here. I don't really understand. I think this game is just a regular game. I don't think there's really an agenda here at all. I think it just came out and gave people an enjoyable experience without any woke nonsense. That's kind of like what the standard is supposed to be. And now it's succeeding because people are enjoying the content and ignoring what a bunch of whiny crybabies like Andy Cortez have to say about it. Like, nobody actually cares what this guy has to say. And now that his little victory he thought he had, and journalists thought they had, with the tough starts, or at least the not perfect start for Crimson Desert, it's been evaporated. Now they're whining about the loser gamer chuds and making this all about the culture war stuff, which of course now people like this are accusing their ideological opponents of doing while doing it themselves. And overall, yeah, people stopped listening. The user scores on Metacritic have now surpassed the Metascore. And this is shooting up every single day. Because again, people are actually trying it out for themselves and giving this game the chance that, well, journalists didn't want them to give. Okay? But anyways, that's going to do it for this video. As always, feel free to share your thoughts about today's topics in the comments section down below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.